have you seen physical healing?
Oh,
in your church
100%.
or in
Yeah.
other settings?
Oh, yeah.
Can
100%.
you give an example of that?
Yeah.
If God is pro-life, then why would he cause a flood to happen to wipe out most of the population? God is love. How come he can't accept people who claim to be in love if they are of the same sex?
Yeah, that's a great question.
What's going on, guys? Thanks for being on here. This is part 2 of our episode with Jason Cleugh, lead pastor of North City Church.
In case you missed part 1, make sure to click on the link down below and enjoy.
One of the most, common things that I hear from people that don't regularly go to church is like, if Easter or Christmas comes around the corner, they're like, we got to go to church. Like, it seems like certain churches are more packed during Christmas and Easter. Like, why is that? And like, what's the question I should ask here? Like, what's the relevance of that? Like,
do you ever find that in your church? Like, there's a lot more people during those like holidays, and like, do you say anything different at that sermon, or do you tailor that sermon differently towards those people that don't come every Sunday, but at the same time kind of like want to come, if that makes sense? I guess, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't tailor my sermons or my talks. Easter, Christmas, they're tailored to the time of year, but I don't tailor them to the people who are going to be there, because all of my sermons are tailored to, like, it's not original with me, but we use the phrase outsider focused, insider friendly. So we try to make it so that every time that I talk, every sermon that I give, my conviction is not that you believe the way that I believe, it's that you understand what I believe. And if you can understand it, well, then it's up to you to wrestle with it. It's not up to me to wrestle with it for you. I've wrestled with it for me. You have to wrestle with it for you. And so I want to be able to present it in a way that you can understand it. You don't have to agree with me. That's not my issue. Because if I can convince you, somebody can unconvince you and have a better argument. So my issue is not to be the greatest arguer or greatest defender. My issue is just, how do I make it so that you can, on a basic level, understand it? Now, when it comes to those special seasons, I always know that there's more people. It's like almost double.
Yeah, it's weird.
Christmas and Easter. But I think most of the reason that is because in general, as humans, we don't live for the why, we live for the what. And if you only live for the what, then what you get is, well, this is what we do. Well, we go to church on Sunday. And if it's just about the what, well, then it's just about function and duty. And if you have no meaning to it, well, then what I do is, well, I used to go every week. Well, now it's once a month. I don't have a whole bunch of why behind it. I don't know why I go. I just go. It's the what. And eventually it loses all its meaning for me. And it's just a matter of, oh, it's Christmas or Easter, so I guess I got to go.
Yeah.
But if you live for the why in your life, the greatest, most successful people in life, not financially only, but are the people who have a why behind their life. They know why they do what they do. They know why they're parenting. They know why they're spousing. They know why they're adulting. They know why they're realting. They know why they're pastoring. The greatest, most successful people are the people who know their why. And if you know your why, then your why gives you purpose. So that when because I get up, like this past Sunday, I was up at 5:45 in the morning. I was at our church for 20 to 7. I was the only one in the building. Did I want to get up? I was smashed. I was so tired from Saturday night, and I wasn't out late. I just was exhausted. I had a really long week. I was the guy preaching this past Sunday. I did not want to go to church. I wanted to stay in bed. I wanted to watch the pregame NFL stuff all morning, and I wanted to watch the Bills game at 1:00 because Bills are my team. Yeah. I wanted to watch them, and they won. But I love the Bills, and I wanted to do that. But I know that what drives me is my why, and I knew that going Sunday wasn't even about me preaching a sermon, because it's not always about that for me. God has put me there because he has a reason for me to be there for someone individually that is going to need Jason to be there in the lobby to talk with them for a few minutes. Not Pastor Jason, just Jason. God's going to need me to be, and they need to be there because I'm going to need some of them to encourage me because I don't always feel like I do a great job of preaching. And I need some people to come up and go, Pastor, that was great. Thank you. That really spoke to my life. I need them there. And if they live on their why, then they have a purpose for being there. If you live on the what, you lose your purpose, and then you lose your passion, and then you lose your frequency, and then it just becomes a matter of special occasions. You've missed the whole point. Wow. And it's all about the why. And most of the time, if you are committed to whatever you do and it's haphazard or half-hearted, you've lost your why. And that doesn't even restrict itself to church. It's work. If you feel like work sucks, it's not always because your work sucks. You've lost your why.
Yeah.
You've lost why you're there. You're not just there to make that widget or get that down the assembly line or make more money for the company. There's why for you there. You're there as a person to contribute to other people and for them to contribute to you. There's a why that's in your life. You're not just parenting to raise a kid. You're parenting to raise an adult who loves people and serves their community and is a great contributor. Even if you remove the faith side of stuff, when you have your why, changes everything.
I like that. That was deep. I wanted to shift gears.
It's probably as deep as I get.
No, honestly, that was great. I want to shift gears and just ask you, do you do counseling or like with couples or like things like that? Or do any of the other pastors like help with counseling for people that, let's say, need advice or couples advice or marriage advice, things like that?
Yeah. People ask me all the time, Pastor, do you do counseling? I'm like, no, because I'm not a professionally trained counselor. So I have people who I trust who are professionally trained counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists that I recommend people to and that we send people to. But I'm always like, I'll do one session with you just to kind of maybe help explore what's going on in your marriage or your life or whatever. But if you want actual counseling, I'm a firm believer that you need to be with people who are trained to do it well. And I'm not trained to be a counselor. And to a degree, I was only trained, even though I did seminary, I got all my theological training, I have my bachelor's degree, all that kind of stuff. Those aren't the greatest things I learned. I've learned over 30 years of being a pastor. That's what makes me even remotely decent at what I do. It's not the training, and I'm definitely not trained to be a counselor. And so for me to give advice on some of that stuff, I feel is disingenuous for those people, and it isn't the greatest way to help them. I want them to go, it's kind of like if you come to me and you don't see very well.
Yeah.
I'd be like, well, you know what? That's great. We can pray. But you know what? They have this great invention called glasses. And we have these optometrists that they're amazing people. And you could come to me and I'd be super arrogant if I was like, the ocular nerve does this.
Yeah.
But I don't know what I'm talking about. You need to go to an optometrist who they can get you healthy. They can help deal with this stuff. You want to talk to me about spiritual stuff and practical everyday life stuff and how you live your spiritual life and your practical life, I'm down. But when it comes to all the psychology stuff, you need to go be with somebody who is trained and can really help you.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I think we've all probably heard people, like certain Christians say, oh, well, just pray on it. You don't have to go to a doctor or anything like that. Thoughts on when people say that? I think you just pretty much told us.
Yeah, that's pretty big garbage.
Yeah.
That's terrible. If I'm being honest, it's terrible. It's terrible thoughts. It's just flawed. We shouldn't only go to the doctor. We should pray and go to the doctor.
Yeah.
We can't, if we're terrible with money, go, God, make my money turn into millions. God goes, no, I've given you a brain.
When they say, send me a check.
Right. You can't do that. It doesn't work like that.
So for you law of attraction believers,
that's not how it works.
you got a harsh reality coming.
It doesn't mean that God doesn't do the miraculous. He does. I've seen it in my life, and he does. But God partners. The Bible talks about how God partners with us. He doesn't just do everything for us. He partners with us, and he requires us to use the brain he gave us, to use the mind he gave us, to use the skills he gave us, to use the talents he gave us. you can't just sit on the couch and go, God, provide for me. He's like, it's kind of like that story. The person gets in a hurricane and they're on the top of their house and, the boat comes by and, no, I'm waiting for God to rescue me. And then the helicopter, and then they die and they shrink they drown in the flood. They get to heaven and they're God, why didn't you save me? I sent the boat, I sent the helicopter, I sent the police,
That's a great analogy.
Or another one is, I wish God I could win the lottery. I wish God dies, goes to heaven in front of God and goes, why didn't you let me win the lottery? He's like, you never played.
You shouldn't play the lottery. Just, that's a really bad use of your money. But I know I'm being super simple with it because I've watched God heal people like right in front of my eyes.
Have you seen physical healing?
Oh, 100%.
Or in
Yeah.
other settings?
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a couple. My wife and I, we weren't able to have children naturally. And it's just kind of weird how God does this, but we ended up, adopting our daughter. And I was always frustrated because as a youth pastor, there'd be kids in the town, in the city I'd live in, and they get pregnant. And I'd be like, God, why are you allowing like 16-year-old girls to get pregnant? And what is going on?
Yeah.
And in the church we're in now, here in North City Church, we had a couple come up to us on a Sunday morning. This is probably 15 years ago. And they were like, we can't have kids. We don't know why. The doctors can't figure it out. Would you pray for us? And I'm like, really, God? Really? This is before we had our daughter. Really, God? Are you like mocking me right now? Like, you want me to pray for these people to get pregnant when we can't get pregnant? Like, it's those moments, right? You're like,
that's tough.
God,
That's tough to
what is
wrestle
going on? But as a pastor, I know my why. I'm called to believe that God can do the impossible, even if I'm not seeing it in my life in the same area. So I prayed like 3 weeks later, Pastor, we're pregnant. I'm like,
Wow.
We haven't told anybody. We just took the test. I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's super humbling, but also challenging for me. So that's one example of kind of right in that space. But we also did a missions trip to El Salvador. We did it 9 years in a row. Missions trips, they're just humanitarian aid trips is what they are. And we were in the capital city of San Salvador, and it was on a Friday night. And we were in the streets, and I was speaking, and we do games with kids, and we did flag routines and dances and music and all this stuff. And then I'd get up and talk with an interpreter, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. And like 35 degrees night in San Salvador. It was awesome. The stars are shining and like thousands of people hanging out their windows.
That's cool.
And the streets, like San Salvador, in the area we were in, was really dirty, not nice at all for what you would see in a Western world and with your eyes. And at the end of my message, I talked about how Jesus was the healer and that he can heal you. And whatever you have, we want to pray for you. And all the way down the street comes this kid, and he's got the arm braces and leg braces. Okay. And he's got those kind of the brace sticks with his arms, and his mom's beside him, and his legs are all bent and twisted, and his arms were like really thin. So were his legs, like really spindly, like just bone.
I think it's like cerebral palsy.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. We didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But that's what it would have looked like.
Yeah.
And he walks up. Took him like 20 minutes to walk down the street. And I'm with one of my friends, and he's like, Jason, this mother wants us to pray for her son. And I was like, okay. So I sat down on the curb in San Salvador, right on the curb with we call it street juice. It's just like, there's just stuff in the streets there. I sat right down because I want to get right down close with this little boy. And my friend took the little boy's hands. The kid was about 10 years old. And I put my hands around his legs, like really spindly little legs. And we just started to pray. And I just started to pray, Jesus, you know who this little boy is? I don't know his name. And I was praying in English because I know very little Spanish. Yeah. And they had no idea what I was praying. We were just praying in English. This little boy and his mom. And there's like thousands of people on the street with us. And our team from our church, they're praying with different people all over the street. And all of a sudden, as I'm praying, I'm about 5 minutes into praying, just, God, this would just be incredible. And I know you love this little boy, and he is your son before he's this woman's son, and you love him way more than his mom does, and you know what's going on here. And God, I don't know exactly why you brought me down to San Salvador, but maybe this is one of those moments. So Jesus, I believe you're the healer. You can do everything today the same way you did when you were here on earth with us, and everything can happen the same way. So in Jesus' name, be healed. I just pray that these legs would grow and these arms would grow, that the muscles would go strong. And as I'm praying, my hands just start growing like this. His legs start growing in my hands to full muscles.
Wow.
And the mom starts screaming. Just starts screaming in Spanish. And I was like, and all of a sudden the kid starts running circles around the street. And then he books off down the street and the whole street starts cheering because they all know this kid. Wow. And he's running up and down the street and he leaves his crutches in the street. Wow. Just his braces and his crutches and his leg braces, arm braces, they're all left in the street. And to this day in the church in San Salvador, that kid's now like 25. He preaches on the street himself now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of churches that sometimes you visit as like a tourist attraction almost. They said that they've become tourist attractions rather than actual like operating churches. But so many people that have left their canes behind and things like that, right? So how does that happen in terms of the actual like physical healing? I mean, you're praying, right? And there's all kinds of like schools of thoughts on this, but you're praying and you know, and sometimes you pray and maybe the healing doesn't happen. So like how does the healing happen exactly? Like what's the process behind it?
To add on to that, do you believe in the gift of healing or do you believe in just healing?
I believe in both.
Okay.
To answer your question, I have no idea how it happens because it's supernatural. It's God's doing, not mine. I can't heal. I'm not a healer. God's the healer. Jesus is the healer. So I don't know how it happens. I just know God does it. I've seen people, I have a good friend of mine who, when he was 18 years old, started to lose his hair like really bad. And he was at a church service and he just was totally insecure about it. And he said, God, I need you to stop my hair from falling out. Like it was falling out in clumps. He's basically said, I've not less, and he's now like 70. He has the same head of hair now as he had when he was 18, but in like 6 months he was going almost all bald.
Wow.
I don't know how it all worked. God just does stuff. Like he's God. I'm not God.
Yeah.
Right. I know it sounds really weird. I'm not trying to make it Doctor Who stuff. But it's supernatural. So there's things of it you just can't explain. But God does it. When it comes to the gift of healing and healing, I believe in both. Like I don't believe the Bible talks about there's spiritual gifts that God gives when you get saved. And there are some people who God gives the spiritual gift of healing. So more often than not, when they pray for people, they get healed. I had a really good friend of mine. He's passed away now. But God gave him the spiritual gift of healing. And I would watch him and he'd pray over people. They get healed like all the time. Like,
really? Wow.
Oh yeah. Like they cut their people's casts off and their legs were fully healed. Disfigured legs, people who were bent over for like 5 years and couldn't walk without their head bent down to their waist. And in a moment, they put their hands on them, prayed for them, healed, and they stood up immediately and they've been healed ever since. Watched crazy things that God's done. But I've prayed for those two experiences are the only two that I told you where I've seen God actually do the miracle there. I've prayed for thousands of people and not seen the miracle happen that I know of.
Well, I could see that, maybe your prayer request for your hair didn't work.
Right, and mine obviously didn't work. It wasn't me. I was praying for it.
Sorry, I had to take that shot.
No, you're totally.
Sorry.
I always tell.
I'm getting there. I had to take that shot.
I'm old enough now that I got more hair at my nose and ears than I got on the top of my head.
I had to put it out there.
Yeah.
But on that note, like, do you feel like it's like your friend, may he rest in peace? Like, did he go to hospitals and just start praying on people and they would just heal? Out of the hospitals.
They would never let him do it in North America though.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because they don't want religion to be in there. So he would go to other countries.
And he would go walk into hospitals.
Walking on people. Yeah.
People would leave.
Yeah. Dozens of people get healed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah. It's, you don't hear about that stuff very often just because it goes against such a narrative. Because if you believe that, then it forces you to question all of this. And so people don't want to put that out there because then you have to give an answer. Well, what's the answer? Well, it either is supernatural and God's there, or it's a trick.
Yeah.
Well, let's just not talk about it.
Yeah.
Because then we don't want to have the God conversation. Yeah. So that's kind of how we do it. And so I've prayed for many people. I only know of 2. Now, it doesn't mean other people haven't been healed that I don't know about after I prayed, because sometimes you pray and God heals them like hours later. I don't know if that's happened in people that I've prayed for. But I have friends who have the spiritual gift of healing. And what I just want to clarify, because I don't want to be super weird spiritually about this. When God gives a spiritual gift, we don't get to use it as a weapon or on our own. We use it according to what we feel God's telling us at the moment.
Okay.
So like a great example of this would be if you go to the New Testament, when you get to after Jesus has been crucified, buried, and rose from the dead, and 40 days later he ascends to heaven, then the book of Acts chapter 2 happens, the Holy Spirit comes, if you read it in the book of Acts in the New Testament, and then some of the disciples are walking into the city of Jerusalem, and they heal a guy who's been completely maimed from birth, and they heal him right there in the spot. Well, Jesus would have walked by that guy every time they went to Jerusalem, because he came to Jerusalem 3 or 4 times a year, and he would have walked by him and Jesus didn't heal him. So the Bible also says, Jesus says, I only did what the Father told me to do. So there's times where he went into whole villages, and the Bible says that he healed everybody.
Yeah.
And there's other times he went places like his own hometown, and he said, I couldn't do any miracles because their faith were just empty.
Yeah.
Which is 0. And Jesus would have walked by this guy at the beautiful gate multiple times a year and chose not to heal him, because it's all in whatever God is doing at that moment.
His purpose. Yeah.
Right. And so we have such a, let me say it this way. I have such a short-term view on life because I see what I see. So, and I want what I want, and I want what I want now. I want the hair to grow back now. I want this to be healed right now. And God doesn't do things on our timeline because he knows that there's more at stake than just what we want, because his answer to our prayer is never just about us. It's also about other people. And so when you read scripture, you find the phrase in the fullness of time, or at just the right time, or suddenly. It's suddenly to us, but it's not suddenly to God. He's had it planned from before time ever began and knew he was going to wait till then, because he knew doing it then would then mean all of this. If he did this here, it wouldn't mean any of this. So God has an eternal view. He sees the big picture, kind of like us with our kids. We're like, I know you want this right now, but we're going to give it to you at this age because it's going to mean all this to you then.
Yeah.
It's a very weak example, but it
works.
Serves the purpose.
Yeah. That's awesome. So
did that answer your question? Or
it did.
It's my best
did.
attempt anyway.
It did. I'll be very honest. Like before this, like I'm very skeptical in nature. So before I set my views on something and say, you know what, I'll choose to put my trust and believe in that view. When it comes to, let's say, healing, I've just heard so many different perspectives on it. But hearing your personal experience with that boy, and even like your friend, how would go into hospitals, like it really does open my eyes to where, there is the gift of healing, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's such the divide like on that specific topic within the Christianity umbrella. But wow, that was amazing.
One thing I might add is, the Bible tells us one of the names of God is that he's healer, Jehovah Rapha. He's healer. How do I say this the best way, or best way I can say it? It isn't, God is the healer, but it isn't his his normal way of operating in every moment. Like his desire, like the Bible tells us that God's ultimate desire is not that we're healed. God's ultimate desire is that we are more formed into the shape of looking like Jesus, not physically, but character-wise, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, so that we are shaped into the image of Jesus. Because the more we become like Jesus, we are everything God wants us to be. And so we have such a limited view that we think we can serve God better if we're healed. When God says, well, someday you're going to be healed in heaven. So get over that stuff. I can use you right now, no matter where you're at. Because lots of people who are fully healthy don't do anything for God.
Yeah.
And some of the people who are they struggle the most with their health, they have learned how to obey God through the pain. And they're so much more subservient. They're so much more servant-hearted toward God because they recognize that this world is not my ultimate home.
Yeah.
And someday God is going to heal it all. But when we get to heaven, there's going to be no miracles. The Bible says they're going to cease.
Yeah.
There's going to be no need for miracles because everything's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So, but there's lots of people who see miracles and don't believe.
It's true.
Right? So God's main goal isn't to give us miracles. God's main goal is to give us his son and then shape us into the likeness of Jesus.
Yeah. And just because you're a Christian doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get healed physically.
No.
of something. Like look at Nabil Qureshi, the apologetic.
Right. I met Nabil. He was my friend.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
that's I think a good example
Yeah.
to look at where it's
Absolutely.
like faith-filled man.
Yep.
You know,
Nabil was awesome.
God, and he passed away.
Right.
Right. I think it was cancer. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was cancer. It was really bad cancer. Yeah.
And so like that's an example where like it wasn't God's will. It's safe to say it wasn't God's will to heal him physically, and maybe God had.
But he did heal him. He just didn't heal him on this side of heaven.
Exactly. Okay, that's a good point.
And I know that's the long game that God plays.
Yeah.
And that's where your faith comes in.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, I'm a Christ follower, but it doesn't mean I don't have to wear glasses because my eyes suck.
Yeah.
And they're getting worse the older I get. Like I'm now got to get like transitions. Like I need to see the fine print. Like, like it's not great. And I could pray, and I have prayed for God to heal my eyes. He hasn't.
Yeah.
But that has no bearing on whether I can love people and God can love me and I can love God and I can do his plan for my life.
Or whether you believe in God.
Or whether I believe in God.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, eventually, he will heal my eyes.
Yeah.
He just hasn't chose to heal them yet. And God did heal Nabil. Not in the timing we wanted him to, but he did heal him.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds super like colloquial and really, really churchy and really religious, but it's also true.
It's the reality. Yeah.
So these are a lot of like, we went down the rabbit hole on the spiritual side of things. And there are a lot of like questions that people ponder and I've searched up for myself and wanted to know the answers to. And they do have a little bit more to do with the physical, where we're living. So we're going to fire these off.
Shoot.
And,
These are tough questions.
They're tough questions.
Shoot.
These are
Ready?
tough questions. So I'll start.
Go off. Yeah.
right.
Start us off.
So if God is pro-life, then why would he cause a flood to happen on all the earth to wipe out most of the population? And maybe during that time there were children, perhaps there were pregnant women, or as an example, why would he, the first child that was born in Egypt when the Israelites were wanting to leave, he wanted to take the Israelites out of Egypt and the Pharaoh wouldn't allow Moses to do so. And so one of the curses that happened on the Egyptians was their firstborn child died.
Firstborn male child, yeah.
Yeah. And
Both in
why
their
would-
cattle and their humans.
Yes, they're animals and the humans as well. And that was the sign that then allowed the Pharaoh to say, okay, take your people and go. Why would God allow for something like that to happen?
Or why
If
would
he's
he do it?
pro-life? Why would he do it or allow it to happen if he's pro-life?
Yeah, that's a really tough
you these are
question.
tough questions.
No, the best answer I can give to start with this, I don't know all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. Well, it's kind of a cop-out. No, it's the truth. There's parts of it that I'm never going to be able on this side of heaven to get my head fully around. Ultimately, for me, this doesn't mean I'm right. This is just how I've been able to wrap my heart and mind and thoughts around those things. Ultimately, is the problem with us for me, in my opinion, the problem with us as humans is we like to see God as only benevolent, loving, and pro-life. It's all we like to see. And for us, pro-life means no death. But for God, pro-life doesn't mean no death. Because if that was the case, Jesus never would have had to die. God is not just pro-life. He is pro-eternal life with him. He's not just pro-life. And because every one of us will live for eternity. God is pro-life and we're all going to live for eternity. The difference is a whole bunch of people are going to live in hell for eternity and a whole bunch are going to live in heaven. So God's issue is not whether he's pro-life. We're all going to live forever. His issue is where are you going to live life forever? So when I read the Bible, I discover a God who is not just loving and kind and filled with grace and mercy. He's also the judge. He's also just, completely, fully, 100% purely just. He's also holy. He's also righteous. And that goes against so much of our human pictures of God because we need God to be a teddy bear and not everything he actually is. So God is pro-life, but he also can't have sin where he is. So he's also judge. Now, in that, God says he extends his mercy and his grace until eventually he will judge. But there are moments in our lives and in human history where he does judge in those moments. The flood was one of those. Egypt was one of those. He does it these days. I'm not one of the people who goes, oh, that earthquake happened. That was God's judgment. I have no idea. I stick to what's in the Bible. I don't know about those ones. But God was very specific. When you read back and you read the Bible story of the account of the flood, God was very specific that he had people who were telling the world what they should do, and they just fully rebelled. And so God said, okay, enough. I need to judge this one here. And then Egypt, hey, I've warned you. You know, the interesting story about Egypt is Joseph was there first, and a Jew from Canaan, or modern day Israel, went and rescued Egypt. Joseph, the Old Testament Joseph, not Jesus' earthly father Joseph, he was the one who rescued Egypt from the 7 years of famine. Yeah. And then it was a few hundred years later that now the Israelites have grown so large in the land of Egypt that now the Pharaoh was persecuting the Jews because if we don't do something about it, they're going to take us over. Yeah. And so it's interesting to me that the people who got the Egyptians through the famine are the people that now they're persecuting. And they should have known better. They should have realized, hey, these Jews are not out to get you, and then you turn them into your slaves when they're the ones who delivered you. And so God says, enough, I'm going to judge you. And we struggle so much with God being judge because we only want him to be nice. Yet, we know that in our world, all you hear is everybody clamoring for justice. But we don't want God to be just toward us. We want justice. So if this guy does this to me, I want justice immediately. And I don't want just to have back what he took from me. I want him to pay dearly. I want him to get way more worse than he gave me. But for some reason with God, we don't allow that. For some reason, we hold God to a standard that we don't hold ourselves to. For some reason, we allow ourselves to have something that on the base level, we don't even permit God to have. When God is the ultimate righteous, holy, perfect judge who says, you know what? You went too far. So enough. And me as a father, sometimes I go, honey, this is unacceptable. This is now the discipline. These are the consequences. And as humans, we don't like consequences. We love to be able to do what we feel is right. But just because we feel it's right doesn't mean it's right. There are a lot of things I love to do that are wrong. And same with everybody else. And I know I'm kind of talking a little bit long on it, but there isn't a great, super easy, probably smarter people on your podcast who know more about answering it than I do. But that's how I reconcile it, is I go, well, God's the judge, and who am I to judge God? And there are some things that he goes, enough. I'm dealing with this. And he's just God. And I don't want to be in a place to be judged by him in that way. So how do I lean more toward not being judged?
Yeah.
Well, you gave the context of that particular example in the flood or in Egypt, where those people were doing the wrong things, plain and simple. And so if God is real and he is a judge like you're suggesting, then what does a judge do? A good and honest judge do? I would assume that the good and honest judge will judge properly and as you said, righteously. And as a result, you know, the punishment has to fit the crime, right?
And only God can he is the one who knows exactly the punishment that fits the crime. Yeah. But you also read in the Bible that it says that God doesn't want anyone to perish. So he's long-suffering or ultimately patient. He's ultimately loving and gracious and kind, but he is also judge. And when I discipline my daughter, that doesn't mean I'm no longer a loving father, because we have this twisted view that discipline means not love. Well, the Bible talks about how real discipline is actually love. Love is not just hugs. Love is hugs and shaping you into the right character formation. It's not abuse. That's not discipline.
No, yeah.
But consequences and discipline that restricts you and puts guardrails up in your life. We have guardrails on the highway. The guardrails aren't what's dangerous for you. It's what's on the other side of the guardrail. But in life, for some reason, we've decided we don't need guardrails. And God said, no, these are guardrails. I'm telling you, on the other side, you know, you guys have maybe heard this. The Bible says, you know, in the Old Testament says, hey, I put before you two doors. This door leads to life. This door leads to death. But like the Price is Right, ding, 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 choose this one. This one's life. Choose. So it's not like God goes, oh, I'm just leaving you out to grope in the darkness. He says, I've told you this door leads to life. This door leads to life. Just like health, you don't just say, oh, I choose to be healthy. You have to act healthy as well, which means you put guardrails in your life. You have to say no to certain foods, or no to certain foods more often than not, and say yes to certain other foods, and say yes to certain habits and no to certain habits. You can smoke as much as you want. Sure you can. You're not going to end up being fully as healthy as if you didn't smoke.
It's true.
It's not going to happen. So for some reason, we want to apply a standard to God that we don't apply to ourselves.
Yeah, and I feel like God being the creator and, you know, the one that gave us life, I feel like he can at any time choose and decide to usher us into the afterlife, because that's realistically like what it is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like he does kill people, but he's just pretty much transferring them from this life to the other life. And he can choose to do that whenever he wants, right? But yeah, that's
why Jesus told the story in the New Testament about the lamps. And he was like, guys, you got to keep the wicks in your lamps trimmed. Like first century, right? You didn't have light bulbs. And keep your lamps trimmed and your oil filled with your lamp, because the time of the end of your life is going to come. And if your lamp isn't trimmed, when the bridegroom comes, or the groom comes to take the bride, if you don't have oil in your lamp, and the story, he said, well, some of them went off to get oil because they didn't keep their lamp trimmed, and the groom came, and when they came back, it was gone. It was over. Yeah. So God is always talking about, you just got to be ready. Live your life ready, because then you don't have to worry. Yeah. Just be ready.
So I like that. Next question I wanted to ask you. So if God is perfectly good, how could he have created Lucifer, being that a being that chose to do evil, like, doesn't that mean evil came from God?
Great question.
Thoughts on that? Stumped you, eh?
Sorry, was there more to that?
No, I was like, I stumped you, eh, on that
No,
one?
no. No, it's a great question. Well, if God is perfectly good, then why did he create you? You do evil. Does that make God evil?
No, it doesn't.
Right? I'm not asking you the question
No, for
necessarily
sure.
for you to answer. I'm
Yeah.
just saying,
So would you say that it sounds like you're saying because we have that free will to decide between right and wrong, Lucifer in this example had also free will when God created him, and he wasn't like a robot kind of thing.
Right.
Right?
well, back to the cell phone. I create my cell phone. If I do evil with it, does that mean this was evil and I created evil? Or if someone does evil with it, no, you can choose to use yourself or other things to do evil. That doesn't mean your creator was evil. You know, whoever makes the gun, and this is the terrible argument of our world.
Yeah.
Oh, they're evil. Well, there's a lot of guns that are used to do a lot of good.
Yeah.
It hunts our animals so that we can have food. It protects us because it keeps people from using guns, because a gun is, I know I'm being super politically incorrect, but
That's okay.
a gun is not evil.
Yeah.
That's what you do with the
Police
gun.
officers use it. The military
Right.
use it for.
It's not
hopefully
evil.
for good.
Yeah.
You can use, sorry, that's my thankful alarm on my phone. It goes off at 12:30 every day.
Oh, nice.
And so I remind me to be thankful. So I'm thankful I'm with you guys today.
We're thankful
Awesome.
you're here.
Thankful you're here. Yep.
You know, it's
It's what the person does with it, right?
yeah, it's what the person does with it. And God, the Bible says that Lucifer was the most beautiful of all archangels. Like, he was the song worship director. He was the music director in heaven and created the most amazing everything. And he just decided that he was going to ascend God's throne and he was going to be like God. And God said, oh yeah, see, that's where you missed it. I created you beautiful, not so that you could be full of pride, but to resonate my glory and my goodness. And you've chosen to do evil with it. Okay, then out you go. And, you know, no different than if my daughter does something wrong, that doesn't make me wrong. I still might have to suffer consequences because she's my daughter,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily mean I did anything wrong. It just means she had her own free will to do her own choice. She knows better. She knows that she shouldn't do this. She knows what we've taught her. And if she does it, that doesn't mean I'm evil or even necessarily did anything wrong. It means she chose to do something wrong.
Awesome. And just to follow up on that evil question, so why does God allow evil? I know you could probably take hours to talk about
Yeah.
this. In a
You got
short
2 minutes.
You have a
Yeah.
couple minutes. Carson, timer starts now. But seriously, like in a short way, if you can, like how would you answer that question? Like, if God is loving, right, why does he allow evil to exist in this world?
Yeah. Yeah. Super huge question. I can never answer it in like a quick soundbite, but I would simply say this. If God stopped everything evil, then where does he stop? Because he's not just loving, he's righteous. So if he stopped the rape, which is terrible,
Yeah.
if he stopped the murder, which is terrible, he'd also have to stop you from thinking that lustful thought.
Yeah.
He'd also have to stop you from cheating on your taxes. Not that you're doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
That person, I won't point at you. Yes. He'd have to stop that person who tells that white lie. He'd have to stop that person who gossips. And then all of a sudden we cease from being free will people to robots.
Yeah.
So if he literally stops one evil thing, then who's the arbitrator of which evil things he stops?
Yeah.
Because the argument I have, or not the argument that people give to me quite often is, well, why would God allow this evil to happen over here? I'm like, okay, well, if he stops that, just so you know, you're going to have to pay your taxes from here on out.
Yep.
And you're not going to be able to gossip. And the moment you gossip, God's going to judge you right on
Strike
the
you down,
spot.
yeah.
Like the moment you lie, the moment you think a lie, the moment you think a lustful thought about that person who's not your spouse.
I think we all just be dead.
Of course.
Yeah.
God would judge us on the spot. So for me, the greatest answer for me has always been, well, whose standard then? Is it your standard or my standard? Now, I'm a big hockey fan. I'm a baseball fan. I'm a football fan. But, if you were to talk about football, you ask the people who are alive today, well, who's the greatest quarterback? Most people go, oh, Brady's the GOAT. Brady's the GOAT.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about guys from my dad's age? No way. Like Marino in his day was the jam. Or you go Terry Bradshaw. He was the GOAT. Like, you go back to those moments. So who's the judge? Well, which generation gets to legislate the morality? Who gets to choose who's the GOAT? Well, God. So he's the one that sits above all of it. And he's the one that also says, yeah, I am God. I'm the judge, but I'm also long-suffering in mercy and grace. And I don't want anyone to perish. So my mercy is going to hold out. And sometimes I'm going to judge it. But you know what? There's just natural consequences. You do something stupid happens back to you. You fall out of the building, you're going to drop because I put gravity in place. That's not evil. That's just, also you lie, it's going to affect me. If we're in a relationship together, you gossip, it's going to get back to it. It's not God allowing the evil necessarily so much as he's allowing us to be humans. And in the middle of allowing us to be humans, the great story of Jesus is that he doesn't hold being human against you. He came to earth to be one of us, but do it perfectly so that we could find a savior, so that we could learn how to be human with him.
Oh, I like that. Thank you.
This is a tough one.
Shoot.
So if God is love, how come he can't accept people who claim to be in love if they are of the same sex?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, just because you are love, it doesn't mean you love everything. I love my daughter, but I don't love everything she does. But I can still love her fully and completely and not love what she does. Even in the middle of her doing things that I hate and that I have told her she shouldn't do, I still love her. Because love is not, real love is not dependent on what someone does. It's dependent on who you are, not who they are, who you are. And so my love is not dependent on how good my friends are or how perfectly obedient my daughter is or my spouse. My love is dependent on me and how I choose to love. And God, while he is love and he is loving, he doesn't love everything we do. And my daughter in my house, your house has different kind of rules in your house that unspoken, spoken, that you live in your house long enough. You just know you don't take your shoes off and leave them in front of the living room. In other houses, that's okay. In your house, it might not be okay. Yeah. It's kind of an unwritten rule. Hey, put your shoes back over here. They go over here. Or you don't leave a plate on the counter. Or you don't leave the table without taking your plate back. Or you don't put your clothes on the floor. They go in the hamper. We have laws or things that we create in our homes that are our standards.
Yeah.
And because we're the ones that created it, we get to create the standards. And when my daughter breaks those codes, doesn't mean I don't love her anymore, but it means, hey, you can't live outside of that and live here. To live here means to live this way. If you don't want to live this way, you don't have to live here. No problem. But to live here, it means you have to function this way.
Got it.
And so God, in a really poor example, is that he's our heavenly Father. He's the creator. He's the one who created us. And he said that this is the way that as humans you are to express love. It is to be with inside marriage, and it's to be between a man and a woman. It doesn't mean that people who are living a lifestyle outside of that he doesn't love them. It just means he doesn't condone what they do. He still loves them, but they're not functioning within the parameters that God set up. And he said that you can't tell me you love me and not do what I've commanded.
Yeah.
Right? One of the ways that I tell my daughter, I'm like, honey, you love me, right? Yeah. Then why do you keep doing this? And that's why I show grace and mercy. That's why God doesn't smote us dead.
Yeah.
Just like that. He's long suffering. He's long in patience. He loves us. He doesn't want anyone should perish. So he will let us live outside of his boundaries for a long time. But eventually he goes, yeah, this is the standard. You don't have to fully get it, but this is the standard. You come to my house, you don't have to fully agree, but to live in my house, this is my standard.
I heard a analogy that I really liked, and it went along something along the lines of, if Jesus went to hell and opened the door to hell and said to everyone, okay, you can come follow me to heaven. The analogy goes, everyone would rush to the gate and slam the door in his face because everybody that is there chose not to be with Jesus on this life. On the afterlife, they chose not to be with him. And why would God force people to be there with him? That's not love. Love isn't forced. Right. So because God truly does love us, he leaves us to our own desires. And that's what the Bible talks about. So I feel like that was a really good analogy. And it kind of just going back to the question, God loves us, but he's also given us free will. And he won't force us to do what he wants us to do. If he did want that, he would have robots, not humans.
Right. Created robots.
Right.
And love ultimately isn't actually a feeling. That's the lie of our world. Our world is that love is a feeling.
Yeah.
It's not. True love is actually a choice and an action. And right actions eventually breed right feelings. You do the right thing long enough, you will feel the right thing eventually.
Yeah.
And too often we go, oh, I want to do what I feel. That's what must make it right. Well, lots of people feel a lot of terrible things and do a lot of terrible things in the name of their feelings.
It's true.
Love is not ultimately an expression of your feelings. It's an expression of your choice. It's an action attached to your choice. And then feelings will go. The problem is we confuse lust and love. Don't want to go down a crazy track, but we confuse those two.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Couple more and we're done here.
Yeah. So there's about 3,000 different types of gods that people can believe in.
There's probably a few million ultimately.
I was gonna say
maybe more.
yeah.
Maybe more. Why should somebody choose to put their faith and trust in the Christian God? What would you say is the differentiating factor between, the Christian God and all these other gods?
I think with that, like, how do you know for sure? How do you know for sure?
Yeah. Right. Why the Christian God? Why not the
Buddha.
Islam
Why
God
not
or Buddha?
Right.
Why not whatever? Why not be an atheist and believe that, put your faith in that a rock hit our earth and we over millions of years ago and we grew out of monkeys?
Yeah, I think those are questions everybody wrestles with. I think for me, it came down to, and they're legitimate questions. They're legitimate, like you should wrestle with those. Those are, the Bible God isn't against those things. We should, even in my talk at my church yesterday, I talked about how even in the Older Testament, the Jewish people said, hey, if you want to choose and you want to serve these other gods, then make your choice. You can do that for now. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the God of the Bible. We're going to serve the Creator God. So you can choose it. You're allowed to make the choice and you should wrestle with it. And you should get to the place where you've made your decision. Ultimately, though, only one person can be right. Like ultimately, only one way can be the way. It's not possible for every way to be the way.
So Oprah's wrong? Because Oprah said you can believe in whatever you want. And
yes,
that's
I believe Oprah's wrong.
Yeah, that's the new mainstream thing, right?
It's just not possible.
So what you're saying is there's objective truth. There's right.
100%.
There is wrong. It's not about your truth is subjective to you and mine is to me and Carson's to him. You're saying that there is a right and a wrong when it comes to this.
Yes. I think there are truths, small t, and there's truth, capital T. I think there are truths that are, you drop it off the table, it goes down. That's true. But just because it's true doesn't make it right. Only the capital T truth is right and righteous. And it's not possible for every way. If you want to talk about how to make money, well, there's a whole bunch of ways. But I wouldn't say there's very many ways that are right. There's a lot of ways that are wrong, but none that are right. They're just ways. They're not right or wrong. Just like my phone is not right or wrong. It's what you choose to do with it, and how you made the money determines whether you did it righteously or unrighteously. But there isn't one right way to make money. There isn't one right way to talk about Jesus. There isn't one right way to parent. But in the ultimate meaning of life, there has to be only one way. There has to be. Because if there's 50 million gods, then it's going to be more chaotic when we get to heaven than it is here. Because now we're going to be in the presence of every one of those gods, all saying different things. The chaos that would ensue would just be unbelievable. So for me, it came down to the fact of there has to be just one way. And when I looked at all the ways and looked at them all of them didn't say they were the one way. They all said they pointed to the one way. They said they testify of the one way. They said they don't know the one way, or there's many ways. But Jesus, man, he came right out. He laid the smack down. And he said, no, I'm not just telling you the way. I'm not just showing you the way. I am the way. There is only one way. You only get to God through me. You don't get to the Father any way else. And Jesus wasn't trying to be offensive. He was trying to be loving. And the greatest way that I love my daughter is to be truthful for her, to be truthful to her. The greatest way that I love my friends and my family and my church and my spouse and, your coworkers is to be truthful, not abusively truthful. You don't want to go, oh, you look terrible today. You don't want to abuse people with the truth. But in the ultimate truth of the whole reason you were made, man, Jesus stood up and he owned it right to the very end. And he died for it. He died believing it, living it, and he rose again to prove it. And then all of his disciples, the 11 that were left, because Judas hung himself, the 11 that were left that eventually became 12 because they chose a 12th one, every one of them to their grave, and almost all of them were martyred. You don't give up your life for a lie. You don't give up your life for, like, under torture, under martyrdom, being tied to a stake and burned at the stake and being crucified upside down like Peter. You don't do that if it was all a big hoax, if it was just a ruse to make some money. And none of those disciples made money. They were all tortured and imprisoned and abused and mocked. They lived lives that were just horrible. You don't do that if it's just a fabricated story. You go and do that to people for them to love your fabricated story so they worship you and give you money. Jesus laid it out, man. He's the original GOAT. He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. And if I'm wrong, I'm screwed. If I'm right, I get it all. Awesome. I know that's really maybe crass. Maybe that's not super spiritual for some people, but
No, that was great. Thank you.
that's my deal.
I just wanted to do a quick little section that we like to call Would You Rather, just to get to know you a little bit more. These are fun.
Yeah.
So
All right.
I'm just going to ask you, would you rather, and you just pick either or. So,
Shoot.
So Jason, would you rather read a book or watch a movie? That's a good one, eh?
I love books. I read tons of books. I'd probably read a book.
Read a book? Okay, cool. Would you rather have something sweet or savory?
Sweet, guaranteed every time. You don't even need to have the answer.
Would you rather wake up early in the morning or would you rather be a night owl?
Wake up early in the morning.
Wake up
hands
early?
down.
Okay.
Oh yeah, early start.
I'm a night owl.
No, baby. You got to get to it.
Yeah, I like that. And would you rather take a road trip or take a flight to somewhere?
Well, after COVID, I'd rather take a flight. But flight. Let's
Flight?
go with flight. Yeah.
Cool. I
Yeah.
respect that. And would you rather have super strength or the ability to fly?
Fly.
Fly?
Oh yeah. Cool. Then I wouldn't need to take a flight. I could take a road trips, but like
Whenever
Yeah.
you get bored of the road trip,
yeah,
just
let's
fly
fly.
there.
Let's fly.
Okay, last one. Would you rather have Tim Hortons coffee or Starbucks coffee?
I don't drink coffee.
You don't drink coffee.
I don't
okay.
drink coffee.
Fair enough.
But if you had me to choose, I would go to Starbucks because they have the sweet drinks better than Tim Hortons.
Yeah, no,
Kind of
that's
flavors. So
that's an
I
easy
choose
one though.
that, yeah.
Starbucks drinks are, those drinks are way better than the Tim
Yeah,
Hortons
they
ones.
are way better.
The Tim Hortons
Yep.
ones are kind of a knockoff. Not
Yeah.
to,
No, they're not good.
yeah, they're not
Except
the
their ice
greatest.
cap, but the ice cap's like deathly for you. So
I think we covered all of our topics.
I think you did an
Do you have any
amazing
questions
job.
for us?
Yeah. That was great.
well, hit me. Why would you care to bring a really uncultured, irreligious guy like me on your podcast? Like, hit me with that. Like,
I think it's important that we get different perspectives and use our platform for things that are good. And I didn't hear anything today that was not good or put people down or not tolerant of other groups of people. And so I think that the media is so negative, and we were talking about that earlier with the headlines, that you'll never hear about that little boy who got healed. So that experience alone could reach somebody today who is going through something similar.
Right.
And so now that doesn't mean like you didn't come on here, in necessarily friendly territory. We asked you some really hard questions about what you believe in.
Yeah.
And so I would welcome the opportunity to bring on someone from another religion, and if they're willing to answer some of the hard questions like you were.
Yeah.
You weren't, we prepared for those listening and they can't see. We have a laptop, we got the questions. We've never, ever prepared ahead of an interview. And we're going to start doing that more often as we get more comfortable doing this. It's not our full-time jobs. But if someone is willing to come in and not be aware of what we're going to ask them like you were, and you did not have any of these questions ahead of time, then we're willing to have them on the show, regardless of where they come from. And so you were the first one who was open enough to say, yes, bring me on. I'll come on the show. So now hopefully from this interview, we can leave a positive impact on those watching and listening, but also
awesome.
we could get different perspectives on
Right.
as well and challenge those perspectives. I think as humans, we're supposed to challenge the perspectives without being
You
penalized.
gotta shake the
for
tree,
it.
man. You gotta shake the
it.
tree and
For
see
sure.
what fruit falls. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to keep an open mind and just understand how people think and why they do what they do, kind of like we were talking about before. And that's one of the things I love doing on the show. It's just we meet such interesting people and ask such interesting questions that people don't really hear often, and it gets the brain going. And we talk a lot about mindset and what kind of mindset it takes to be a successful person. Not necessarily a rich person monetary wise, but successful in life in general, right? And for us, of course, having a solid foundation of why you believe in your faith is huge. And it's super sad, but a lot of Christians don't even know why they're Christians. And I'm sure you've seen that a lot.
All the time.
And it's not a good thing. It's one of those things where, the Bible tells us that, we should know and have an answer for the questions people are going to ask us about our faith.
Even if it's, I don't know, I'll have to get back to you. I got to think it through. I haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when it gets to the deeper stuff for sure. But yeah.
And also like just these things that there's this thing happening in society right now in the West where people are looking to the Christians and saying, well, how are you allowing these things to happen? And if you claim to believe in this, and that, how are you staying silent on these things? Or, why are you again allowing it to happen? And so it's very important that we understand what the doctrine of Christianity, says. And I by no means I'm saying that, we're holding you to that and we're getting it all from you because as you said, we're all imperfect, right? But my point is that it needs to not be skewed because all people know is what they've heard. Maybe they heard one priest say one thing or their friend said one thing and they've never had to read a Bible for themselves or chose to read the Bible for themselves. And so that's why I think using platforms like this to engage in discussion is important. And we've had former mob guys on the show. We've got politicians on the show. We've got maybe current mob guys. I don't know, but we've had all kinds of different people.
I'm not a mobster.
We've had ex-CIA agents on the show, actors, everything from all walks of life. So that's what we want our platform to be about. Just different people from different perspectives and different walks of life sharing who they are and why they are that way.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. If I could just kind of give one last word to
please.
your audience. From me, it would simply be, don't always take my word for it. I'm not God and I'm not Jesus. So all I can do is point you to who I believe the truth is and show you who I believe the truth is and encourage you to get your hands on a Bible and read a Bible. Read it with someone who kind of wants to help you. Our tragedy of our world and so much of us as humans is we almost always try to create God in our own image. We just try to create him as a better version of ourselves. And that always ends up screwing us up.
Yeah.
And you look at the world that's filled with gods that they're just better versions of us. They're not really God. And what I say, even though I believe in a truth that is exclusive, because truth is exclusive, it is not open to everything. The truth is, by definition, it's exclusive. That means there are things that are untrue. It has to be exclusive. But just because truth is exclusive doesn't mean that God excludes you. God's desire is for everyone to find him and to have a real, living, honest, truthful, authentic relationship with him through Jesus. And I've discovered that. I've not discovered how to do it perfectly, but I've discovered it. And it helps guide my life and helps guide me when I succeed and when I fail and when I don't know what to do. And if anyone feels like there's something I've said that's been maybe personally offensive to them, nothing I've said was intended to be offensive at all. I just really believe that God's desire is for everyone to find Jesus. And sometimes as Christ followers, we've missed that. And we've wanted people to find us rather than Jesus.
Yeah.
And we've made Jesus into ourselves. And we've kind of screwed it up. So don't confuse me with Jesus. Don't confuse anybody else with Jesus. Go find Jesus. He'll help you navigate it. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you again,
Thank
Jason.
you.
Appreciate it.
You guys are
Yes.
awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate
So
you.
good. Likewise.
And Carson, too.
Shout out to
Shout out to
Thanks,
Carson.
brother.